What's up, guys? It's Sode back with you after a second straight slight losing night. We're just kind of treading water almost here the last few days, which obviously is not exactly what I want. It was a 2-3 night, but it was not as bad as a 2-3 night normally would be. Losing a little bit less than that. Usually I'd lose like 3 units on a night like that. Losing my unit. I only lost 2 last night because one of the losers was the Columbus Blue Jackets, which they definitely got outplayed, man. I mean, what can I tell you about that? I don't think it was quite as bad as the final score looked, but it was not good. But because I played them as a money line underdog, the market actually moved way towards them. So there was a lot of market agreement with the Blue Jackets side on that. Like, I think by the time the game went off, you could only get like plus 120 on their money line or something, and I was on plus 150. So I had there was a lot of value in that ticket, and it just was a loser from start to finish, which I hate, but that's the way that it is. But at least that one, you put less money on it, so you lose a little bit less. Then we had Ohio State was kind of a brutal loser. They looked like they were going to cash the whole time, which I think I'm getting ahead of myself because I think there was another college basketball game before that I had. What did I even have last night? I don't even remember. No, NBA. I had the first game. Yeah, all my college basketball was late last night. I had the Pacers. That was an easy win with the Pacers. And then the Brooklyn Nets, they couldn't get it done. They were winning the game outright somewhere late in the second quarter. It's like, okay, they're hanging in this game. And then the game just completely fell apart in the second half. The Nets had like a lot of, they had a huge free throw attempt advantage and still wound up losing that game. I don't really get it. I mean, otherwise, the statistics are fairly close in that game, so I don't really understand how they lost by the margin that they did. I don't get it, but that sucked. And then we had, of course, it sucked even more because I was right about the Phoenix Suns in the late game against the Clippers, and I didn't play it, and I got that one right. That was a close game, but that one would have been a hit, as well as the hockey over yesterday. That Calgary-Philadelphia game went way over. They got to 9 goals, so because of that, maybe I'll play an over today, just because my overs, they just seem to hit when I identify a spot like that in hockey, man, regardless of what the market looks like, regardless of whether it's a typically low-scoring team. You got to just kind of identify the situation. And then we had Ohio State, as I was saying. That was a brutal loss for Ohio State. They were winning that game by double digits multiple times throughout the game, and then the entire lead fell away, it slipped away, and then I think they actually fell behind towards the end of the game. It wound up going into overtime, and then in overtime, they looked like they were going to be able to extend the lead again. I think they were up 4 late in overtime, so it's like, so I think they had to come back to send it into overtime after they'd blown a huge lead. Once you get into overtime, all right, you got the home favorite here, even though teams are tiring out. And again, they had a 4-point lead in overtime, so you're thinking, all right, we need the 5.5 here. I think the line was up to 6 when the game went off. You get some intentional fouls, that game could still hit for you. That's not what happened. And they wound up only winning the game, I think, by 4 or maybe 2. I forget. I think it was 4, whatever it was. And it was a very high-scoring game as well. Brutal. Ohio State, they should have taken that game in regulation, man. They had the game. And then we did have 2 moneyline underdog wins, though, on Texas A&M over Auburn and Arkansas over, who did they play? Vandy, I think. So those were both underdog money line cashes, so that helped out as well. So like I said, for a 2-3 night, that's about as good as a 2-3 night could be, or as not bad as a 2-3 night could be. It could be a lot worse usually when you go 2-3, but we had 2 money line underdog hits, plus one of the losers was a cheaper money line underdog, so that worked out at least. And then Nevada also lost brutal. I forgot about that one. That was a close game pretty much the whole way. They had a lead late in the game, and they wound up not getting there. That was probably the one that I felt the least strong about, so maybe I shouldn't have played it. Let's move on to today, man. Let's talk about this card. I think I'm going to change the ordering here a little bit, and I'm just going to hit because we got a lot of conference tournaments starting now or in play right now. I'm going to talk about most of those near the end. I'll talk about some of these bigger games up front. We'll go Maryland and Michigan first. I'll talk about the conference tournaments at the end. Number 13 at number 17, Maryland and Michigan. This line, you got Michigan up from 1.5 to 1.5 with juice. 60% of tickets, 92% of the cash coming in on Maryland, though. So the odds makers are telling you Maryland is the better of these two teams. which the rankings makers also are telling you that. And I don't disagree with that, but Michigan, man, I mean, they've been able to get through and win a lot of close games, and they're coming off an ugly loss to Illinois, and this is their final home game, so I would have to lean to Michigan just because of that. I mean, I think they're going to want to turn this thing around a little bit here. I don't think they played Maryland yet this year. Maryland is a good team, and Maryland having to go out to Ann Arbor, maybe not the greatest travel spot for them either. So Michigan, again, they're just staying at home. They haven't traveled for a while. They've had most of their recent games at home, 3 straight home games. Again, just a really ugly loss against Illinois there over the weekend. I think maybe they were even looking ahead to these last 2 games against Maryland and Michigan State. But this is senior night now, so I would only look to the Michigan side in this game. Maryland, they are coming off some easy games. They just beat Penn State. They're staying on the road, though, so actually they're not traveling from Maryland. They're traveling from Pennsylvania up to Ann Arbor, but still they are traveling 2 straight road games. They do actually have a revenge game in their final home game up next against Northwestern. Northwestern actually beat them at Northwestern, one of Maryland's rare conference losses there. But again, yeah, I think it sets up a little bit better for Michigan to be in a bit of a bounce back spot there, and with no travel, that's the way I would look. The line has moved in that direction, even though the cash percentage doesn't look like it. So that's the way I look in that game. Number 5, Florida. Number 7, Alabama. That Maryland-Michigan game on Big Ten, by the way. Sometimes I call up where it is if you want to watch it. Florida and Alabama. This game's on ESPN2. Probably the biggest game of the night. This is a big game, and Florida, I mean, well, first of all, this is going to be a high-scoring game, man. I mean, you would have to imagine, because this is going to be 2 fast-paced teams that can both score. And Alabama's defense can continue to be a bit suspect at times. I actually don't have Ken Palm up right now. Maybe I should. Sometimes I do. Let me get Ken Palm going here. Oh, sorry. I have it in a different window, but hopefully that's all right. I might be referencing that a little bit as I go. But anyway, Florida and Alabama here. I mean, they both play really fast tempo, as we know, especially Alabama. And it's going to be at Alabama, so you know they're going to try to push the tempo. Florida will probably oblige, as they also want to play fast. Alabama's defense a little bit more suspect. Both these teams are top 5 offensive efficiency teams, which is why the total is crazy, up from 175 to 178.5. So if you like the over, you're losing a little bit of value on it, but I would still only look to the over in this game. I mean, that's probably actually the best way of playing this game, better than the side. Although I'll talk about the side in a second. But yeah, the over seems to make sense here. As far as the side is concerned, Alabama down from 3 to 2.5 with reduced juice. So the line has moved down on Alabama. Does look like they have 70% of the cash, but 60% of tickets on Florida. So the line move is in opposition to where we see the cash percentage. So a lot of times you can see, like, I don't know, you have to try to read the market and figure out what's going on here. Like, did that line move happen first? Was that like a false move to try to get like a better number on Alabama? I try to get it down into money line range, and now the cash is coming in on Alabama at the better price. Doesn't mean that there are actual professionals like disagreeing on this game, liking both sides. Maybe. Florida's coming off a nice win over Texas A&M, and now they got to go hit the road here for this Alabama game. Yes, it is a big game, but I think, Florida having to go on the road, not the easiest spot. It's a big game for both teams, but actually, now that I think about it, I'm trying to remember what my thinking process was on this. I think Alabama could be in the slightly worse spot here, because I don't want to say this is a sandwich spot. I mean, this is a final home game senior night against Florida, so they're going to have to get up for this game, but they have 3 huge games in a row, man. So I don't think I've seen a spot like this very often where you have a top 5 matchup, but it's wedged in, sandwiched in between 2 other top 5 matchups that might actually be somewhat more meaningful. Alabama having lost to Tennessee, kind of a brutal buzzer beater loss, I think on a buzzer beater 3 to Tennessee there, and they got number 1 Auburn up next. Huge rivalry game. That's the Iron Bowl. But I don't know that they can really overlook Florida either, because they're talking about fighting for the 1 seed. So like, if you think that matters to these teams, and I think it matters a little bit. And we're talking about conference seeding as well. I don't know if that matters as much, because basically these teams are probably going to be 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, in the SEC. Auburn already clinched the number 1. Even though Missouri is kind of right behind them, but whatever. I don't know that they care that much about that, but all that being said, there is reason for both teams to show up in this game, but maybe Alabama's going to be a little bit more of the tired team after coming off that physical battle against Tennessee, although Florida did just play a pretty physical Texas A&M team too, but they got out of there way more easily. Alabama lost on kind of a heartbreaker at the buzzer. So my slight lean in this one would be to taking the points with Florida. But I think the better way to look in this game is the over, or maybe looking at one of these team totals to go over. Maybe Florida team total to go over if you kind of like that side. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Alabama has the worst defense. So you're technically actually getting points with a better defense with Florida, by the way. So that's kind of the way I would look in that game. And then we got, I don't know if any of these other games are really that interesting. We do have the Atlantic 10 is not in their tournament yet. They're finishing up the regular season. So these teams that are at home are hosting senior night in those games. I don't know if there's a whole lot to really say about those. Xavier, I was considering looking against Xavier in this game because they're coming off a big win, man. They're on a roll right now, but they did have wins against mostly inferior teams in the Big East, and then they finally got a win against one of the better teams in the Big East against Creighton, and they wrecked Creighton. And I mentioned that I liked Xavier in that game. I wish I had played it. I almost played it. Big win for Xavier, but now you're coming off one of your biggest wins of the season, winning by 22 points. Now people are saying you're potentially going to be in the tournament, and yes, I know Xavier, they basically just put themselves in the tournament discussion again, so they can't really afford losses. That's true. They have to keep winning, but they're coming off a big win here, man. They got senior night coming up after this, even though it's not revenge against Providence. But what is revenge, and quick revenge at that, is that Xavier beat Butler by 13 points when they played at Xavier, and that's who they're playing tonight, at Butler. And it's Butler's senior night. And this looks like a little bit of a misleading line, man, as you get a line that's basically close to a pick the winner here. And you look at these teams' records, it's like, I mean, Xavier, you're only laying 1.5 or a short money line on this. It's pretty much pick the winner, and Xavier is in the tournament discussion. They have the way better record. Butler sitting below 500. Like, what recreational bettor is going to look at that and think, oh, yeah, I want to take Butler here when it's basically a pick the winner? But again, the odds makers are kind of telling you something. They think this is a little bit closer than what you would think, even though Xavier is the better team. Butler's home court advantage makes this a pretty close game here. I think the situation also kind of makes it a close call. I would lean to Butler. Like I said, I think it could be a little bit of a letdown spot for Xavier, even though, yes, they do need to keep winning. Butler, this is their final home game, man. I mean, this is senior night for them. They've lost 2 games in a row, including losing on this floor. They played close on this floor against St. John's. They're coming off a stretch of 3 road games in 4 games, so that's not that easy. They've actually been a bit better on this floor at home. I mean, they have a few more wins at home. They actually played Marquette to within 9 on this floor. Only lost by 4 to Creighton on this floor. And again, lost by 6 to St. John's on this floor, and lost by 4 to UConn. So Butler, they've had a decent home court advantage here, man. So they've played pretty well. Even though basically if you're taking them, they're going to need to win that game. But it would be Butler or pass for me in that game. And by the way, I don't know if Saab is in the chat here, but I apologize for last night for the Columbus play, although you were already on it before I mentioned it. But I liked the spot, man, and they did not get there. And hopefully you just stayed on Georgia. That Georgia game was crazy, man. Georgia, I think, was losing I think they might have been losing by double digits early in that game. I'm not even sure, but they turned it around, and they had the lead late in the game. It was a close game at the end, too. I mean, I know Georgia wound up winning by 11, but kind of a misleading line there. I think they were still the right side, basically, when it all comes down to it. They won the game. They outplayed South Carolina, I would say, but the final score a little bit misleading. It was definitely not an 11-point Georgia win as far as how the game played. It was a close win for them. All right, we got Missouri at Oklahoma. I mean, you know Oklahoma's going to have to show up focused in these games because they are a bubble team, and I think they're on the outside looking in right now. Missouri coming off losing, but kind of a big game against Vandy, and now it's a second straight road game at Oklahoma. They already beat Oklahoma. Not only did they beat them at Missouri, but they wrecked them. But 82-58, a 24-point win, a huge win. Now, second straight road game and going out to Oklahoma, who's new to the SEC, by the way. So Missouri, maybe not used to going out to Oklahoma. I mean, it's been a while. I think both of these teams were in the Big 12 quite a while ago, but it's been quite a while. So this current Missouri iteration is not used to having to go to Norman, Oklahoma here. And they got a big game in their final home game against Kentucky, man. And Missouri, yeah, I mean, they do want to get one of these top 4 seeds, though. So that is what they're fighting for. They could still get a top 4 seed, I think, in the SEC here, which would mean they get like I think 2 buys in the tournament or something like that. So that, yeah, ideally they would want that, but I think this is a tough spot, man. So I don't know if that's really going to be their primary focus here. And you're getting Oklahoma as a home underdog here in a decent spot, and they are heavily motivated team, right? Because they've lost so many games in a row. Well, they've lost, 8 of their last 9 games, basically, but pretty much all to good teams, except that LSU game mixed in there, which doesn't make any sense. But this is their final home game now. They lost their last game on this floor only by 1 to Kentucky. So they have pretty much been a little bit better on this floor than on the road, but had some stinkers at home too. But again, they're coming off a road loss, had a home loss last time on this floor. This is senior night. They're getting points, and they're going to be in desperation mode. And I know you don't want to really necessarily look blindly on a team that's in total desperation mode because they might have the pressure on them, but if they're getting points and they really, really are desperate for that win, that's the way I would look. Missouri's up from 4 to 4.5. 75% of tickets on them. It's 73% of the cash coming in on Oklahoma. I agree with the Oklahoma side in that game. I don't think it's quite strong enough that I'm going to play. And I'm being very selective today, man. So I don't know. We got Marquette at UConn. I mean, I don't know if I want to talk about this Wisconsin game. I don't know if that's worth talking about. I got to try to get through some of these games, man. Marquette, they beat they lost to UConn at home already. So this is a road revenge spot for Marquette, actually. It's somewhat of a big game because you are still facing the returning champs and you haven't beaten them this year, and they beat you on your own floor by 8 points. So even though Marquette is a big home game in their final home game, senior day against St. John's coming up in a few days, I don't know that they're really going to overlook UConn here. UConn is laying points, though. So UConn is one of those unranked home favorites here against a ranked road opponent, although I don't want to play this particular one, again, because it is road revenge for Marquette. I think both teams are going to get up for this game. Both teams want to show up here. Connecticut up from 2.5 to 3.5 with juice, 67%, just 3.5. 67% of tickets, 57% of the cash. So UConn, the line's moved up on them, but it looks like they're getting more of the ticket percentage than the cash percentage right now. The one other thing, if you do like UConn, is that this is a huge pacing contrast. This game on FS1, by the way, at 8:30 p.m. UConn, they play really, really slow, and Marquette likes to play really, really fast. So even though Marquette wasn't even able to win this matchup at home, but you got to expect UConn's going to slow this game way down, try to make Marquette really uncomfortable. So that is kind of an advantage to UConn there with the huge pacing contrast there. So that is one reason to maybe look to the UConn side. UConn coming off a fairly easy win over Providence. This is actually not their senior night, as they have Seton Hall up next. So I think this Marquette game is a little bit bigger. So I'm expecting both teams to show up. I guess if you forced my hand, slight lean would wind up being to UConn just because of that pacing contrast. I think they're probably going to be able to slow it down at home, but I don't know, man. We'll see what happens. And then my one play today in college is Ole Miss plus the points against Tennessee. I think this is a spot where you fade Tennessee, man. Tennessee is already down from 4.5 to 2.5. I apologize for this, by the way. I never saw the 4.5. It was 3.5. If you could still get 3, I would do it. I mean, I still just like Ole Miss plus the points. So, I mean, do with that information what you will. Again, I apologize for grabbing some of these numbers. This was 3.5, like an hour and a half ago. So, I don't know. 56% of the tickets, 81% of the cash coming in on Ole Miss. So, the money looks like it is heavily coming in on Ole Miss, in agreement with me. I obviously agree with that. I agree with myself. Tennessee, I think this is a letdown spot. They just had that huge win over Alabama. Basically put themselves back on the 1 seed line of the bracketologies. Now they're having to go on the road for a third road game in 4 games before they have senior night, even though I know it's against South Carolina. But South Carolina's been giving some teams some problems, and it's senior night. I mean, you always kind of look forward to that. Ole Miss, I don't believe they've played them this year, but they also have to go out on the road. Ole Miss has kind of been struggling a bit, although they're not going to miss the tournament or anything like that. They're not going to Ole Miss the tournament, but Ole Miss, they're going to want to turn it around, man. I mean, they lost 3 straight games before finally righting the ship in this win against Oklahoma. Now this is senior night for them against Tennessee. You got to think they're going to be up for this game, man, with one of the top teams coming into their place. Ole Miss has dropped from the rankings, and I think they're probably right there on the cusp. Like, they probably deserve, well, let me see. Where does Ken Palm at? He has them right outside of the top 25. He's got Tennessee 5th, Mississippi 26th. Mississippi likes to play a bit faster than Tennessee does. So that's another bit of an advantage here. Tennessee one of the 20 slowest teams in the nation, and Mississippi's 131 in pace. So you got Mississippi going to want to try to speed this game up a little bit. And Ole Miss, they've been a pretty balanced team, man. Ken Palm's got them top 35 in both offense and defense. I know Tennessee also is in both, but these teams are actually comparable offensively. So you're also getting points with two teams that are better on the defensive side than the offensive side. So that's also good, getting points at home with some teams where it might be teams both focusing on defense. And like I said, Ole Miss might be able to speed up Tennessee and kind of throw them out of the game that they kind of want to play. Tennessee being in a letdown spot as well, like I said. And Ken Palm actually has Tennessee ranked higher than Mississippi in the luck index too. So telling you that Tennessee maybe overperforming a little bit more than Mississippi is right now. So that's my one college basketball play. And again, I apologize. The line has moved so significantly, man. But do with that what you will. I like Ole Miss getting points here. Actually, let me see. What does Ken Palm have this number at? I didn't even look. I just liked the play. He's got it at 3. So, I mean, 2.5. I wouldn't be opposed to taking the 2.5. I mean, obviously, I prefer the 3.5. But getting points in that game with Ole Miss, I kind of like it, man. And then let's get to the conference. Let's get to these conference tournament games here, man. As we have, first off, the Sun Belt, which actually the earliest game on the slate in all of college basketball is Southern Miss at Georgia Southern, or not at Georgia Southern. All these games are in Pensacola, Florida. So this is the Sun Belt tournament. We're moving along in this tournament. Southern Miss, I was able to escape last night against. Who was it? Coastal Carolina. Southern Miss. I mentioned I liked Southern Miss in that game. If you were on Southern Miss, they did cover, but you really had to sweat that. They won by 3 right at the end. It was a situation where they got called for 2 fouls in a row with 14 seconds left, in a situation where Coastal Carolina was going to have to intentionally foul. Southern Miss fouled them on an inbound pass, which they did. It was the right call, but then Coastal Carolina missed the second free throw, and then there was a foul called on Southern Miss on the box out as well, which I don't know. I mean, he kind of grabbed the guy's arm a bit. I don't know. A lot of times you let that one go. So that gave Coastal Carolina more free throws, but they missed another one and then had to intentionally foul. Southern Miss was able to make free throws to get it back over the number there. Crazy finish to that game. Not very good basketball being played there, but it was a close finish. Some close finishes, man. And most of these games are on ESPN Plus, so that's why I have ESPN Plus. You get to watch virtually all of these small conference tournament games, and some of them are pretty entertaining, man. So ESPN Plus, you get so many games. I think it is actually worth it. And you can kind of see here, look how many games are on ESPN Plus, man. It's almost all of them, the ones that are not televised otherwise. This game, Georgia Southern's up from 2.5 to 4.5 with juice. Heavy money coming in at Georgia Southern here, man. I always like to say, though, when a team has already played and won a game in the tournament, they're now familiar with that venue. So Southern Miss just got that game out of the way. That gets the pressure off of you, and it gets you adjusted to that venue. So Southern Miss got to play in this venue last night and win the game. So I do consider that to be an advantage. But that's not the only thing I look for, right? I won't blindly play that. Georgia Southern is the better team here. Southern Miss actually beat Georgia Southern the only time they played this year, which was at Southern Miss. I believe this was the only game. Southern Miss was a 2.5-point favorite in this one. So that would tell you that if Southern Miss was a 2.5-point favorite on their home floor, then there's no way that Georgia Southern, well, actually, I don't know. Georgia Southern being a 2.5-point favorite, it depends how much home court advantage you give these teams, actually. I guess Georgia Southern being 2.5 on a neutral actually kind of makes sense. So the line being up to 4.5 does seem like it's a little bit high to me, actually. I'm trying to get my thoughts straight here. So I don't know, man. I might still lean to the Southern Miss side just because of that, even though it is a little bit of revenge for Georgia Southern. And again, you do have to look at, what did these teams do in the conference tournament last year as well? Is there a revenge motive from that as well? In this case, there is not, but I don't know, man. So, again, we will see. I think I would probably still, the money's coming in at Georgia Southern, but I might disagree with that, especially when the line's getting this high. I think there might start to be some value in looking towards taking the points. Then we do have UL Lafayette, who won last night against UL Monroe, which I think was actually a close finish as well in another bad game. UL Monroe, really not a good team. Old Dominion will be playing UL Lafayette here. Old Dominion and Georgia Southern, of course, hasn't played yet in this tournament. But the money's coming in on both of those teams, despite the fact that they're facing opponents that are already adjusted to playing in this venue in this tournament. So I don't know. Although these teams are all kind of used to playing here because they do play in this venue every year for this tournament. But I mean, some of these teams haven't played here for a while. So getting that, like recent adjustment to it does help, especially with guys that haven't been on the team, that are freshmen or whatever, that haven't been on this team or maybe like transferred over or whatever, that haven't played on this floor before. Old Dominion up from 2 to 2.5 with juice here, so some money coming in on them as well. 67% of tickets, 99% of the cash coming in at UL Lafayette here, though. And this game's going to be after the other one, of course, because they're playing on the same floor. So this game is after that one, also on ESPN+. Old Dominion against UL Lafayette. Let me see. How many times did they play them? They beat them on the road by 11, and that was the only time they played them this year. So it is a little bit of revenge for UL Lafayette here, and they've already played in this tournament. So maybe a little bit more of a look towards UL Lafayette here, even though if you look to the teams that already played in this tournament, you're going against the market read in these games. So I don't know, man. This is actually an overtime game where UL Monroe is actually a 1.5-point favorite. So if you take that out of the equation, it looks like them being a 1.5-point favorite, you would expect Old Dominion to actually be a little bit of a bigger favorite in this game on a neutral, but maybe UL Monroe just gets no home court advantage. I don't know. But maybe that's why the numbers guys are probably coming in and playing Old Dominion, thinking the line looks a little cheap based on this one. Old Dominion actually, even though they beat UL Monroe on their floor, UL Monroe did take them into overtime, so Old Dominion still might be. I mean, teams are not going to be unfocused when it's a tournament game. I mean, it's an elimination tournament. Every team wants to win. Old Dominion had a lead in this game late in the game. They were winning by double digits with 6 minutes left in this game, blew it, and then allowed it to go into overtime. So I don't know what we think about that. And you could dive into the box score and see if there's anything you can see here. Old Dominion lost the turnover battle in this game really bad. Shot fairly poorly. UL Monroe shot a little bit higher than you expect from three-point range, and Old Dominion dominated on the boards. So it does look like maybe there's a little bit of an advantage matchup-wise to Old Dominion. So I really don't want to. I don't want to play these games, man. These games are just ugly. So again. Yeah, and then for Southern Miss, I don't want to analyze these games to this degree. This is crazy. But for Southern Miss, what did they do in their other game against Georgia Southern here? I don't even know, man. I don't know if there's really a misleading box score here, although Southern Miss was just way ahead in this whole game, and Georgia Southern actually came back and made it look closer than it actually was. So Southern Miss actually was completely dominating this game, man, even though they didn't even actually shoot that well in the game, although neither did Georgia Southern. So maybe actually Southern Miss would be a better look based on that than Louisiana, because Old Dominion looks like they can dominate in the paint against Louisiana, which is something that is pretty predictable. That Georgia Southern finish against Southern Miss looks misleading, actually. Southern Miss actually dominated them. So maybe there is something to be seen there for looking towards the Southern Miss side, especially getting extra points there. The Ohio Valley tournament kicks off, and I believe the bottom 3 teams in this conference don't get in. UT Martin and Tennessee Tech is the first game up in this one. These games are all neutral site as well, being played in Evansville, Indiana, where this entire tournament is being played. UT Martin up from 1 to 1.5, which is kind of an interesting move because Tennessee Tech actually swept the season series against them, beat them in both games, and I dug into the box score in those, and there really wasn't anything that looked like an outlier to me in those games. They were pretty close games. Tennessee Tech won at Tennessee Martin by 4 and then beat them at home by 5. So pretty close games. And statistically, they were both close games as well. So maybe there's a little bit of something to be seen there in this game that was at Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech was only a 1.5 point, or excuse me, that's Tennessee State. What am I saying? That doesn't make sense. At Tennessee Tech against Tennessee Martin. Now, Tennessee Tech was only 1.5 as well in this game. So now Tennessee Martin only being 1.5 actually looks a little light based on this. This line would kind of tell you that Tennessee Martin should actually probably be, I don't know, closer to maybe 2.5, 3 on this neutral floor. So you might actually be getting a little bit of value on the Tennessee Martin side. It is double revenge for them. And again, I forgot to look at what they did last year, but maybe that would have me slightly leaning to Tennessee Martin in this game. Tennessee Tech did lose. Oh, no, that was not in the tournament. Excuse me. Tennessee Tech didn't make the conference tournament last year. Never mind. So there's no big elimination revenge here. Because like I said, the bottom 3 teams in this conference don't make the tournament. So the conference tournament. So there's not a whole lot to see in that one. I'm bouncing all over the place. I apologize for being this, kind of lackluster and sporadic here, but I'm trying to get a bunch of information out there as quickly as I can. I want to look at Old Dominion's schedule here as well. Just see, this is actually, you're seeing this live, man. You're seeing how I handicap these games. Old Dominion did not play anybody except Texas State in the conference tournament last year, so no conference tournament revenge there either. In the other Ohio Valley game, Lindenwood has made the tournament. They're fairly new to Division I, and they're up against conference staple Morehead State. So in this game, I kind of think the public is probably going to see this, and they know the name Morehead State. They've been in the tournament a couple of times. I mean, they've won at least one tournament game. I think they won the Ohio Valley last year, I'm pretty sure, and they were in the tournament and got knocked out in the first round by Illinois, if I remember that correctly. I'm trying to remember all this, man, as I am kind of the historian as far as tournaments are concerned, because that's where I focus my autism. So that probably means the public is going to be coming in on Morehead because they know the name and they have no fucking idea who Lindenwood is. Morehead is definitely down this year, though. They are not the Morehead that we're used to. Of course, they're playing in the first round of this tournament, so that's not a good sign. They're down from 1 to pick 'em, so some money looks like it's driving this line in the direction of Lindenwood. And I don't know that I necessarily would disagree with that. If you look at Morehead, they did play Lindenwood twice this year, I believe. They crushed Lindenwood at home and then lost on the road. So these teams split the home and home. They beat Lindenwood by 17 at home, which was a game where, let me see. Morehead was actually a 6.5-point favorite in that game, though. So I don't know, man. As far as line value, that would probably indicate that Morehead should probably be at about a 3.5-3-point favorite in this one. And you're looking at a pick 'em, so that line seems a little bit wrong. Then they went on the road and they lost to Lindenwood by 13 in a game that was a pick 'em price, basically. So again, even though, the line is moving against Morehead, and Morehead does have the name recognition, Morehead does at least have the tournament experience, man. Like, they've been here so many times. Lindenwood has not. And I do think this line, based on what the other lines were in these games, I do think this line is actually a little bit short. Lindenwood had a lead this entire game here, though they completely dominated it. But I think this was an outlier shooting performance, man. Morehead actually out-rebounded them, but Morehead had a really bad shooting game. In this game, only 34.5% from the floor. Lindenwood was 53.3 and 46.2% from three. So I don't think you're going to see that again. So that's a little bit of an outlier, I would say. Kind of a misleading result there. And maybe the other game was a little bit less misleading when Morehead hosted Lindenwood. Morehead shot really well in this game. 47.8 from three-point range. They did win the rebound battle again. So all that being said, as far as like what the line is kind of telling you, the market is kind of telling you that you should look to Lindenwood here. But as far as experience and as far as digging into those box scores and digging into what those previous lines were, I don't think this number is right unless there's some like injury on the Morehead State side, which maybe there is. I have no idea who the players are in this conference, man. So I guess take a look into that and see if the line is like this because Morehead has injuries or something, because I think the line should be closer to like Morehead being about a 3-point favorite there, but I'm not going to touch the game, of course. And then what was the other game? Oh, I forgot to look at Tennessee Tech, that game. I think that, where are we? Man, I got to get through all these games. Tennessee Tech, their game at home against UT Martin. I think I forgot to look at it. UT Martin. UT Martin was a 5.5-point favorite, excuse me. So, again, the odds makers have been telling you that UT Martin is the better team throughout all of these. So I don't necessarily disagree with that on that side. And, the double revenge spot as well. The Summit League begins with the opening round. The Summit League, kind of weird. They have 9 teams, so the 8 and 9 play each other, and then they play into the spot that plays against the 1 seed in the next round. And then other than that, it's a straightforward 8-team tournament. This is Oral Roberts and UMKC, Kansas City. Kansas City's up from 5.5 to 6.5. I forget which one of these teams was the 8 and which one was the 9, but odds makers are telling you Kansas City's the better team. This is on a neutral. This tournament is always played in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I think we're not used to Oral Roberts being this down, though. Like, we're not used to seeing Kansas City being that much of a favorite over Oral Roberts. I mean, Oral Roberts is a name in this conference. They've had a really bad season, though. They're actually the last place team in this entire conference, which we're not used to, again, because they made the tournament a couple years ago. We know they made that run as a 15 seed not that long ago. I remember them beating Ohio State, and they made the Sweet 16 or whatever. But this is not a good season for them. They did beat Kansas City at home, so Oral Roberts did do that when they were 3.5-point underdogs at home. They beat Kansas City. So this line, if Kansas City was an underdog, or excuse me, if Kansas City was a 3-point favorite on the road, yeah, then 6.5 does kind of make sense in this game. And then Oral Roberts got absolutely annihilated at Kansas City. There were 7.5-point favorites in that one. So that line makes the 6.5 look a little bit too big. Too big. Like, you think the line maybe should be closer to, I don't know, just averaging those two things out, maybe the line should be closer to like the 5 or so range, but I don't think it really matters that much between 5, 6. I mean, if you're below 7 and kind of in that range, those numbers don't really matter that much. For Oral Roberts only had 3 conference wins, and they did get 1 against this Kansas City team, which I guess isn't that surprising because Kansas City's not that good either. And that was a home game for Oral Roberts. The game at Kansas City, Kansas City annihilated them. Kansas City shot ridiculously in this game, though, 50% from 3, 57.1% from the floor, but they also completely dominated the rebound statistic as well. And then in the game at Oral Roberts actually had a huge lead in this game. They let the lead slip and actually almost lost the game. Almost blew that game. Kansas City had a terrible, terrible shooting game in this game. Rebounding was actually still way in favor of Kansas City. So Kansas City is the significantly better rebounding team. They have a significant rebound advantage if you read into this. You could look at KenPom statistics and whatever. Kansas City had a really bad shooting night in this one. Only 23.3% from 3, 38.3% from the floor, and Oral Roberts shot 45.8 from the floor there. So all that being said, I would lean to Kansas City in this game. Because, again, I think the public is just going to know the name Oral Roberts and be like, oh, I'm getting a lot of points here. And it looks like two, teams that aren't really that good. That's the name that I know. But, again, that Oral Roberts game, I think that was a bit of a misleading result of the game that Oral Roberts actually won against Kansas City. Kansas City has the rebound edge, which I think is way more predictable. Then we got the Northeast Conference starts. I don't know if I want to dig into all these box scores, man. This is crazy, but the Northeast Conference, this is happening. And in this case, all the home teams are the higher seeded teams. So this tournament is kicking off. This is a typical 8-team tournament, I believe. And it's not at one neutral site, though. Like I said, the top team, the top seeded team gets a home game in every single one of these games. So the first game up is Lemoyne at Central Connecticut. I don't know if we need to belabor some of these, man. Central Connecticut, they beat Lemoyne both games this year. They're a 13.5-point favorite. They're obviously the better team. I mean, what else more can you say? I would probably not want to look to try to take the points with Lemoyne in that one. Central Connecticut, they're the best team in this conference. They should win this conference. I mean, there's actually a pretty big gap, in my opinion, and in KenPom's opinion, between Central Connecticut and the rest of these teams. Against Lemoyne, they actually only won. They just played at Lemoyne. So Lemoyne is used to this venue because these teams just played a couple games ago, and Central Connecticut was a 12.5-point favorite in this game, and they didn't cover, and the game was actually probably a bit too close for comfort, and Lemoyne was winning this game going into the second half. I don't think Central Connecticut paid a lot of attention to that, so that would lead me to believe that maybe they're going to bounce back a little bit from that, and that's going to actually cause them to take Lemoyne more seriously. And earlier in the season, they beat Lemoyne at Lemoyne by 23 points. So if you're going to get a focused Central Connecticut team, I would lean to laying the points with them, and I think that is what you're going to get there. Chicago State, also just an awful team at Long Island here. Chicago State's probably worse than Lemoyne, to be honest, but I think they have the tiebreaker over Lemoyne or something, so that's why they're seeded as the 7 instead of the 8. Whatever. This game, Long Island is down from 13 to 12, so some money coming in against Long Island, but I don't think I would want to look that way, man. Long Island actually just lost to Chicago State not that long ago. In the most recent game, they went to Chicago State and lost by 6. Long Island was a 3.5-point favorite in that game, so that does make this line look way too high, though. Like, how could they be a 3.5-point favorite at Chicago State and now they're 12 and a neutral? I mean, that looks ridiculous. So again, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if Chicago State has injuries or what, but Long Island was way ahead for a lot of this game. They had the lead the whole game, and then they, I think, probably took their foot off the gas and let Chicago State not only get back into the game, but win the game. And Long Island had a bad shooting game. Neither team shot well. Long Island lost a turnover battle. Not a good game for them, but I don't know, man. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on here where, yeah, I mean, Long Island kind of had that game handled. I would say that they were the better team in that game, and they just wound up losing. They held Chicago State to 39 points at home for Long Island. Long Island was only a 7.5-point favorite at home. So, yeah, what is going on here, man? This line doesn't look right? Like, how could Long Island be a 12-point favorite? There's got to be something going on here where Chicago State must have injuries or something, because there's no way this line should be anywhere near what it is here. So, yeah, I think on the surface, Long Island should dominate. It looks like they were the better team even in the loss. And, of course, they dominated Chicago State in that home game. But I don't know, man, because Chicago State, I don't know what I was about to say, but this line looks way, way, way too high. So it looks like, if anything, there's probably some line value in taking Chicago State. There's no way I'm going to get involved in this game. I just don't even know what the hell is leading to that line being so off like that. So, I mean, the books are not just going to throw up a line that's that far off, right? So, there's something going on there. I don't know what exactly that would be. And then the game against Long Island. Long Island does play these low-scoring, ugly games, though. In this game, both teams shot horrifically in this game. So, I don't know what to take away from that. Long Island did have the advantage in the game, though, and won the game, but two terrible shooting performances in that one. So, might expect this game to probably not have a lot of points get scored either. The more competitive matchups here, Wagner is at St. Francis, PA. St. Francis up from 3 to a 3.5. They're still St. Francis, PA, even though St. Francis, New York is now defunct. St. Francis, NY. These games, I believe they split the season series. Or no, excuse me. Actually, Wagner swept the season series. They won both games by 2 points. So these were both close games. Wagner was able to win both of them. Wagner was a 3.5-point favorite in the home game. They won in double overtime. So this does look like these teams are pretty closely matched. The odds makers are kind of telling you the same thing. But if Wagner was a 3.5-point favorite at home, then St. Francis doesn't look like they should be a 3.5-point favorite on the road. But then again, St. Francis was a 2.5-point favorite on their home floor. So oddsmakers kind of telling you Wagner's the slightly better team here. So again, what gives with this line? I don't really know. St. Francis did have a dominant game in this game, though, and they were winning by almost 20 with 7:45 left, and then they actually lost the game. They blew the huge lead, and they went completely stagnant. I don't know what happened there. Wagner did shoot 47.8% from three, which is an outlier for sure. So I don't know what else to do with these Northeastern Conference games. And again, I'm not going to go into it all because there's just way too much to talk about. You can go look and see if there's like an extra elimination revenge angle from these teams getting eliminated by certain teams in the tournaments last year. You can go look at that as well. This line looks like it's maybe a little bit too high based on where this line was in these other games. But St. Francis is in a double revenge spot here. But again, how much does double revenge matter? Double revenge, I think it only really matters because the public is going to come in and look and say, oh, Wagner beat this team twice, so I'm getting points here, so I want to take Wagner. And that's probably not the right way to think about the game. But then on the other hand, I think this line doesn't really jive with what the lines were in the regular season. So again, I don't know if there's injuries or what, but who knows? And then Stonehill is at Fairleigh Dickinson. And remember, excuse me, I'm an idiot. These games are not neutral site. These games, are home. I was thinking these are neutral site. I apologize. But still, what I said about Long Island is still true, man. They're 7.5 at home, and now they're 12. So that doesn't really make sense. St. Francis was 2.5 at home. Now they're 3.5. So that's pretty close to being right. So, I mean, maybe you do look to St. Francis in that one because the public's going to want to take Wagner, who won both matchups earlier in the season. And then Stonehill is at Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson up from 3 to 3.5. Fairleigh Dickinson, I do believe, is the better of these two teams. Not by much, but Stonehill, these two teams split the season series, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm wrong again. Excuse me. Stonehill lost both games. They lost by 11 at home and by 13 on the road. Fairleigh Dickinson was actually a 4.5-point favorite in this previous game and won easily. So what gives? Why is the line so much shorter after this is the most recent matchup and Fairleigh Dickinson won easily? So I don't know. Stonehill really shot very poorly and lost the turnover battle really badly, though. And they won the rebounding battle, so maybe that game shouldn't have been as much of a blowout as it was. But then again, Stonehill did lose at home as a 1.5-point favorite, and they were winning that game early on, and they lost the game there. That one had a closer rebounding battle, closer statistically, closer shooting percentages. So that was really, this game kind of is more indicative of probably what you're going to get here. But Fairleigh Dickinson still won that game by double digits. So I think Fairleigh Dickinson is the way you want to look in that one. They're the better team. Looks like the money is coming in on them, even though, yeah, they swept the season series as well. But in this particular game, even though I might look to St. Francis as being the team that lost twice and they're the favorite this time in this game, Fairleigh Dickinson won twice, I think, for a reason. And Stonehill, I think they're new to Division I, I think, as well. So they're not as used to playing in tournament environments like this, so that gives Fairleigh Dickinson maybe a little bit of an extra edge as well, because they certainly are used to playing in this tournament. And then we also have the Big South starting with the bottom two teams in this conference, at least the bottom two that got into the tournament, with Gardner-Webb up from 5 to 5.5 against USC Upstate. This is all in a neutral site game. This is this is not neutral either. What am I saying? I think this is at Gardner-Webb, which is why Gardner-Webb is favored by that much. Let me just look. So Gardner-Webb, how many times did they play USC Upstate here? And I got to get out of here, man. So I might have to come back and do the NBA and NHL tonight, actually. Maybe I'll do that. Gardner-Webb absolutely demolished USC Upstate in their home game earlier this year, beating them by almost 30 points, by 29 points. No, Gardner-Webb's in North Carolina, so this is a neutral site game now. So Gardner-Webb was 7.5 in this game. They're 5.5. Maybe they should be about 4.5. So maybe because of this blowout win, maybe we're looking at a little bit of a higher number. We had kind of some outliers here. You have Upstate, 20% from three. I mean, that's not good. That's a little bit of an outlier, low percentage. And Gardner-Webb, 45.9%. A little bit of an outlier of a high percentage there. USC Upstate lost the turnover battle really badly. But Gardner-Webb did out-rebound them as well. So Gardner-Webb, we know they are still the better team, though. But maybe that game wasn't as much of a blowout as it looks. Gardner-Webb did win the other game as well. This Gardner-Webb team hasn't been good, but yeah, these are the two bottom teams. Every team gets into the conference tournament in this Big South, I guess, but the bottom two teams face each other in the opening round here. Gardner-Webb, yeah, they're the better team, and USC Upstate is really bad this year, but USC Upstate, yeah, they lost both games to Gardner-Webb this year, and Gardner-Webb beat USC Upstate. That was Gardner-Webb's last win, actually. It was at USC Upstate. They were a 4.5-point favorite on the road at USC Upstate. So that would lead you to believe they should be a higher, maybe a little bit higher in this game, that it's a neutral site game. So I don't know. These lines don't really mesh with each other in these two games, but whatever. Gardner-Webb pretty much had the lead the whole way in this game as well. Gardner-Webb actually had a bad shooting performance from three in this game, 29.2. So actually maybe a little bit of an outlier there, and they dominated the rebounds again. So the things that aren't misleading are Gardner-Webb definitely has the rebounding edge. And I don't think there was that much misleading about this result. So, yeah, Gardner-Webb is the better team. I think they should be able to take care of business here and win this game. That would be my guess. I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to come back and give you my analysis on hockey and NBA when I come back. There isn't a whole lot going on. I will give you those plays, though. In hockey, I'm going to be on Anaheim, Vancouver, over 5.5. After my over lean one last night, I'm just going to go for it. And, of course, this one's going to lose just because I said that. But I think it's a spot where the over makes sense. I'm going to be on the Dallas Mavericks plus 10.5. And if you know how I handicap, you might know why that's the case. But I'll give you the analysis tonight. And then I gave you the analysis already on this one. The one college basketball plays Ole Miss plus 3.5, although you can probably only get 3 or 2.5. Now, that's going to do it for now. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. I'll be back early evening. I'll give you the one of these games is going to have tipped off already, but I'll give you the NBA and NHL analysis then. Gave you the plays already at the very least. And then Tower Gang is on tonight, 9:11 p.m. Eastern, baby. The most hilarious offensive podcast out there. But Patreon.com/Tower Gang if you want the full episode tonight, the longer episode. You get bonus content. You get to watch it live. You get to see it after the fact, or at least once I upload the video, because Patreon doesn't allow you to do it. So it's a slow multi-step process. I apologize for that. And you get a live pre-show as well. So you can do that, and you get to hang out with us in a Telegram, submit to the mailbag, which we don't even read anymore, but it's going to be a fun time. Tower Gang Wednesday, baby. Let's do it. That's going to do it for now. Peace out.